All right, well, I think we can get started.
All right.
This is the Extraordinary Podcast, and my guest today is Marisa Meddin.
Hello. So good to be here.
Thanks for coming. Part two,
Yes,
or a
part
redo
two.
of the first version. I appreciate you taking the time to get back together with me. We tried this. This is our first official Zoom interview, so I'm nervous and kind of stressed that it's all this new technology I'm not used to dealing with.
We've got
But
to start
I think
somewhere.
we've got
Honored
this
to be
one
the
figured out.
first.
Yeah, this will. I think we've got this one figured out. So I'm really
Yes.
excited. And obviously, going through these around a second time is always cool because now I've actually got some insider scoop and I've done a little digging, and so hopefully we can go a little deeper.
It's like I've known you a year already.
I know, right? We do this, and we're old friends now. Or something. So normally I start these off with where are we and what are we doing? But since we're in two locations, we'll start with where are you and what are you doing?
Yes, it's a fun one. I am in Mexico in Playa del Carmen right now, about 45 minutes from Cancun. And as Nate knows, I travel around the world almost full time. So ironically, I'm actually from Atlanta. It is my home base. So normally we could have done this in person, but I would say many months out of the year, I am all over the globe for usually a month or longer at a time. So I've been in Mexico for about 7.5 weeks now and staying a couple of weeks longer because I love it so much. And yeah, it's my home for a little bit.
Yeah, so let's just jump right
Jump
into
right in.
why I wanted to get you on this podcast is because of that crazy lifestyle, man, that Tim Ferriss world that you're living in.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Like, let's talk about what are you doing now and how you got into it, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work completely remotely. So I work not necessarily 9 to 5, but 9 to 5-ish or whatever hours I'm feeling most productive. But I do work most Mondays through Fridays and take the weekends. I try not to live that same mentality and just work when I feel like it and I'm feeling inspired. But I move all around the world. So I've been to 61 countries. I think over 20 in the last 12 months. What else can I say? Yeah, in the past year or so, year and a half, I've lived in Nigeria, Panama, Bolivia, Argentina, Thailand, and Indonesia. I'm in Mexico right now. Can't even remember the rest, but really hopping all over the world. And yeah, as you said, Nate, the Tim Ferriss lifestyle of really believing that I'm not quite working 4 hours yet, but I can work from my computer anywhere in the world as long as I'm connected to Wi-Fi or have cell service. And yeah, I just feel honored that I get to see so many places that when I worked in the corporate world with 2 weeks of vacation, I would have never gotten to this many places in my whole entire life.
Not
And
even
so for
close.
me, it was a very, a lot of people say you're so lucky that you're living this life. And it's by no means luck. It was designed very purposefully to work remotely and be able to work from anywhere I want. And there's ups and downs and hard things and wonderful things, but I love it right now.
Well, and one of the things that you just said right there that really struck out to me was that I lived in 51 different countries. Not I visited or, I got to go see or that, but you're living and
Yeah.
having that immersive experience. And I think that
Yeah.
is so much different than what most people's idea of travel is. Um,
Absolutely.
tell me about how that's different and how what that looks like for you.
Yeah. So when I first started traveling and when I had this idea of what this life would be like working remotely, I really was treating it in my head like I would a vacation. So old me, when I had a place to go, I would look up the things to do and the places to see. And these are the 7 things you're supposed to do when you get here. Um, And I thought that's what my life would be like. And I very quickly realized that's exhausting. And it's also really wonderful to not necessarily do those things. So when I get to a place, I usually don't know what the touristy things are. And I might come across them and I might do them. But to me, the joys are, I was living in Oman in the Middle East, November, December of 2019. And honestly, one of my best memories there was this Friday night. There was a group of us that went to the grocery store the first week we got there. And there's everybody dressed, from head to toe in their local outfits, women all in black with their face covered, men dressed all in white, head to toe. And the grocery store was just so packed. And it's really fun just to see what are all the weird different local foods, how they were living their life. And So yeah, living in a place here in Mexico, for example, I've joined a local boxing gym where I've met a lot of guys. They only speak Spanish. I have to learn to communicate. And my favorite part, honestly, being about Mexico, I love the beaches, but it's this boxing gym. And so it's very different of what I'm taking from it when I'm learning than just, I came to this like 10 minutes down the road in high school for spring break, and I saw the beach, and there's a time and a place for that, but I saw nothing else,
Completely different experience though,
Yeah,
right?
completely
Like
different.
it's like the spring break college life versus once again alluding to Tim Ferriss with the tango in Brazil, like
Yes.
you're doing the boxing in Mexico. I mean, and what better place to learn the art of boxing than a gym in Mexico, man? Like that is
Yeah.
just so cool.
I love it. And the gym is super local. The guy who owns it is a semi-professional boxer here in Mexico, and he made the gym. It was next to his business because he just wanted to train. And then so many people, it's this big open kind of garage door, and people would stop by because they were interested and wanted to do it. And he slowly just opened this gym. And so it feels super authentic. The guys there couldn't be nicer. And it's just so fun.
Well, and I mean, talk about authentic. I mean, that's like as real as it gets,
Yeah.
That's living it for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a friend, like you said, to experience those local things. A friend who just left here a couple of days ago. He is on a mission now to learn the best things in the world from those places. So he's going to Brazil to learn salsa. He'll be there for a month or two, and that's all he wants to do. And then he might go somewhere else to learn, who knows what, the tango, or, just
right. Go to the heart of each little, like go to Brazil to learn the capoeira and all that kind of stuff, or like, where each little, the origins of each thing kind of thing.
Exactly.
The
Or some people
experts
go
are.
and learn a language or whatever it might be. So it's really neat just to immerse yourself in a completely different way to travel, and to travel slower. When I first started, I was hopping around a lot more places more often. And the end of last year, I just really burned out and just feel like I need to slow down a little more. But that's okay too. I can kind of come and go as my body feels, and that's the flexibility of it.
Well, and you brought up an interesting point about the learning aspect is I'm real curious about the language, because so you're going from speaking Spanish to speaking Arabic to, I mean, like all these, so like you're not really, although you are there for a good amount of time.
Yeah.
I don't think you really have, or maybe you do have the opportunity to master language. I don't know how smart you are, what your skill set is, but given that, so what is that like? Do you speak any other languages? And if you don't, how do you deal with that language barrier?
Yeah, it's a fun question. And because I travel with so many nomadic friends, I've seen a lot of different approaches that everybody has. So for me, I feel like it's not that it's not worth my time. I don't choose to spend my time investing learning a language intensely when I go to a place. I feel like I'm able to communicate. I do try to learn hello, thank you, and please, some basic words. Like thank you goes a really long way. I can say thank you in a lot of language. I do speak some Spanish just because I learned it from high school, and it's enough. It sounds very broken, I'm sure, but I can talk to the guys in the boxing gym. I can negotiate with cab drivers. I can get around, but it's not pretty. That being said, a lot of my friends do have a love of learning languages, and when they go to a place, they will talk with locals purposefully or take language courses online 30 minutes a day just to try to learn as much as they can in that place. So it's really, but they also love to learn languages, and it's not my personal favorite thing to do. Again, so I feel like I can find ways to communicate everywhere I go. Google Translate goes a long way. I do feel honestly fortunate that English is my first language, because so many people around the world speak some sort of English. There's definitely places where, they only speak their language, but people in Europe, for example, from smaller countries, I've met some friends who speak 13 different languages, 7 languages, 5 languages.
Wow.
It's amazing. And so, to each their own.
I love the idea of mastering languages and be able to say I could speak 8 or 10 or whatever, but the work that goes behind that, I mean, even with Spanish, I'm like you. I mean, I can get through the basics because of how long I've been exposed to it, but it's not easy, especially I feel like as we're older. I really struggle.
Yeah. And I'm like you. I wish I spoke every language, because I think the beauty of traveling is, for me now that I've been through this, is to interact with locals in really meaningful ways. But there's a real beauty to body language and facial expressions and trying to communicate. And you can read people's emotions, I think. So, yeah. I wish I knew them all, but I haven't taken the time to learn them all.
Cool. Well, hang on just one second. So, the travel lifestyle takes a lot of work to prepare for. And like in your case, you didn't just hop right into this. You did a lot of prep work to get ready for that. So for people who are interested in trying to come up with this kind of lifestyle, tell us about how you got started. What was some of the initial things that you did? What are some of the initial things that people should think about doing before jumping into this?
Yeah, so for me, it was really important to be able to make a full-time living completely online before I left. So some people just want to quit their jobs and go travel and just use their savings and go through it. That's definitely one way to do it. And there's people who are in jobs and that's worth it to them. They just want to quit, get on the road and just go through and then come back and return to your life at home. And that's one way to do it. For me, this was sustainable over the long term. So when I quit my job, I've now started 4 different businesses, but when I started the first one, I moved back to Atlanta. I lived with my parents for a couple of months, saved money, started my business, and really just put my head down and focused. And like we talked about before, I start with the end in mind and work my way backwards of what I wanted. And then the next part's once, let's say you have a business or, a lot of people just work 9 to 5 for other companies, the same way they would work from home in the US or in an office, they just work from wherever. But there's a lot of different steps too, to start preparing to travel. So do you want to put your stuff in storage? Do you want to rent your place out? Do you want to keep your place so you can come back and forth? What do you do with all of your stuff? You have to get insurance.
So many logistical things to consider.
There's a lot of logistical things, but it's funny. I was talking to a friend who has been traveling for the last 2 or 3 years now as well. And when he first started, he said he wrote down a list of all the things that were kind of potentially holding him back when he was deciding between these 2 things. And it was a lot of the logistical things of, what do I do about health insurance? What do I do with my car? What do I do with my apartment? And it's funny, he said he saved this list. And when he looked back at it recently, now, years on the road, he looked at it and said, I cannot believe that those were the things that were going to hold me back. And there's new, different challenges that we experience now that we're here. But to anyone listening, everybody gets really bogged down by those logistics. But if it's something you want, talk to me, push through it, because once you kind of clear those out of the way, there's a whole big world out there that is so worth exploring. And this lifestyle is truly incredible if you want it. Not everybody does.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny how that perspective shifts.
Yeah.
About how you feel about stuff and that clutter, and that's things that they seem so important at the time. But once you've decluttered, once you've gotten all that stuff out of your life, you realize that how meaningless it all is and how much you don't need it at the end of the day.
So very true. I was back home for a week over Christmas, and I went into all my stuff is stored away in a storage kind of unit. And I went and was looking for, bathing suit or something. So I was going to be spending some time in Mexico. And I opened this kind of trunk of all of the clothes that I had, and I just couldn't even believe how much was there. So I travel with a carry-on only and a backpack. And sometimes it would be nice to have, more exercise clothes to go through, whatever it might be. But it's amazing how freeing it also feels when you just don't need things. I can't buy it because I don't have room to put it in my carry-on only. It stops me from having more things. And it just feels very liberating. It's very different. It's more about the experiences.
Yeah, we talked about that with the books. Like you work off of a Kindle. Because that was one of the big things for me is I still love the old paper, hardback, whatever. I even I really do enjoy a hardback book, as terrible as that is. But that would be a tough thing for me to get used to, is having to give that up. But you're able to do that with the Kindle, and you can.
Yeah, and everybody prioritize. One of my good friends, I've traveled with to 5 or 6 countries with her. She was in Oman with me, and she travels with the tiniest suitcase I've seen of anybody. It's very small. and half of it was literally filled with books. She had a stack of
That's
about
awesome.
9 or 10 big
That would be me.
hardcover books, and that's her priority, right?
Right.
One of my friends who was here last month, he is a boxer. He's one that I started going boxing with, and he travels with his boxing gloves and shoes and
Right.
things.
Always got to have that gear, right?
Yeah, if soccer is important to you, you travel with cleats. So again, you limit your stuff, but if books are your thing, if whatever is your thing, I have a friend who traveled with a mandolin, guitar, things like that. Everybody has their things. You kind of pick and choose, and it's like, what is really important to you?
Okay, so what's Marissa's thing? What does Marissa like to travel with that she always keeps around with her?
I don't really. I guess my weird little thing is I have a jump rope. That's my exercise thing. It's like it's
jump
not that
roping
strange.
is hard, man.
It is
that is
hard.
a great exercise.
Yeah, and I love that because I can do cardio anywhere. Running hurts my body. I've had some injuries from soccer. But yeah, I wish I would bring soccer cleats and boxing gloves and more of a lot of things. But to me,
that's my problem. Again, I'd want to have all that stuff. I want to have everything to play with.
Yeah, but you really pick and choose what's important to you. So
and you got a really cool podcast microphone too, or a really
I do have a little baby podcast microphone. Yeah. So you learn to get little travel size things.
I was doing a little bit of research for the microphone for this interview, and I found yours after we talked, and I was like, really? That's a really good one for portability.
Yeah,
and like you can't hardly beat it. It's so compact, and it sounds, and it got great reviews too. So, and obviously your audio was not the issue with our first podcast, so clearly it worked well as well. That's great. So let's talk about books real quick. What are you reading? We obviously 4 Hour Workweek was tremendously impactful for both of us. Tim Ferriss, our little guru guy, bald-headed fool, but I love him. He's such a mentor, I think, for us and so many people, and for people especially like you living that kind of lifestyle and that kind of dream. I mean, he's such a go-to.
So many lives. And I love in an interview recently, he said, I think he was thinking about rewriting the book because a lot of it was written a long time ago, and there's nuances that have changed and things online that are easier. But he said this book is so golden that he was afraid to change it because maybe it would lose his power. So it really, I am not the only digital nomad who said Tim Ferriss changed my life, and it really set me on this path.
Well, what's funny is like I would not be doing this podcast. I mean, if it weren't for him,
I didn't know that.
For me, like I dove into him on the other side because the travel wasn't necessarily my thing, but like from his podcast, like he literally like the recorder that I bought was what he was telling me, and like was really neat. He has some YouTube tutorials and whatnot where he broke down all the different things where I got my music from. I mean, all these different aspects.
Yeah.
And again, it would not have happened if I hadn't.
Thanks, Tim.
So, yeah, thank you, Tim. Be out there listening. But so let's talk about some of the other books and the other things that have inspired you, because we both kind of went down this personal development rabbit hole. What are some of the books that have inspired you and kind of helped you along?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two that are, I would say, my most recommended to clients, to friends, to anybody. One is It Starts With Why, or it's called Starts With Why by Simon Sinek. Yeah. And it's really about finding your purpose, I would say. It doesn't use those words. It calls it your why. And I think that can be a really, I don't know, for me, it was a really hard subject for a long time because I didn't know what my purpose was. I didn't know what my passion was. I just knew some skills, but I didn't really know what to do with it all. And so if that's how you feel, and even if you kind of know what you think your purpose is, it just really puts it into these great questions where you can kind of write out your mission, what's your purpose, and it's really guided a lot of my business decisions. So that's number one. And then number two is The Big Leap, which to me is kind of the next step after that. Once you know your mission, it really kind of puts into perspective why it's so important in your life to live out that purpose, to live out that mission, and what happens if you don't. So the people you're not helping, how you really just you're not as happy, you're not as joyful, everything else in your life doesn't quite go as well. So those are my two kind of all-time favorites that I recommend to everybody.
Cool. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your purpose and how you kind of found that and how that kind of changed over time. I'd love to know, like I'd love to hear your story about the beginning
Yes.
of how you kind of found this purpose going from the 9 to 5 into this
Yep.
new kind of lifestyle, and then how that brought you to where we are now.
Definitely.
Because that's a neat
It's
journey.
been a journey, and I could
Yeah.
never have predicted where I am today. So I'll
Epic
kind of
saga, right?
it is. And on the last 4 or 5 years, it's a short saga, but it's been an amazing one. And I love helping people through it too. So I'll start with my kind of overall mission and then explain how I got there. So my purpose, my why, is to help to heal people so that they don't feel pain and illness, I would say, in the short of it. That's a big umbrella. There's a lot of different work that I do, which we haven't talked about, but we can get into. So for me, there's what I love about this kind of why statement or this mission or purpose is that, again, I think about it as a big umbrella, and there's so many executions that can fit under it as you learn and change and grow interests. So I do public speaking, I do one-on-one coaching, I do group coaching, and then, as we'll talk about, I am a medium, which is really different for a lot of people. And I mean that by communicating with people who are no longer alive. And that is really healing and helping for people. And I'm a true believer that our minds and our bodies are incredibly connected, more so than I think a lot of the Western world gives credit to. There's a lot of people starting to get into it now, but I had this mysterious back pain that I think was emotionally caused. And when I started traveling, it went away completely. I'd had back surgery, I had all these things. But I think a lot of the illnesses and injuries that we have are from emotions that are suppressed. And when we bring those up and can let them out and release it, it makes a huge difference. So yeah, my mission is to help and heal. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I could not have told you that. I didn't know it. I was working in Pepsi, or I was working in brand marketing for Pepsi in New York and LA for about 6 years on all different, I was managing partnerships with the Super Bowl or music partnerships, doing videos with Snoop Dogg, going to the Grammys, Golden Globes, all sorts of things. And it seemed really glamorous from the outside. You know, my friends would look in and see all these celebrities, but I didn't love brand marketing. It didn't get me going, and I don't really drink caffeine. I don't drink much soda. So there were awesome people that worked there, and it was a great learning experience, but it just wasn't right for me. So I'll let you chime in here, but that was the point where I read the 4-Hour Work Week, and I said, there's more. I don't know what it is yet, but I don't know what the next steps are, but I know this isn't right. So that's kind of how it all started.
And so where did it go from there?
Okay, so I'll try to go fast through the different businesses, and feel free to chime in if you want to dig in anywhere. Were you going to say anything?
No. Well, one thing I was going to ask you is like, I didn't really want to dig into any of the one thing I did want to dig into is like the personal side. You had a personal kind of change at that point in time as well, that obviously, because again, our stories kind of are so similar, and we kind of both go down the same path. So that's why it's so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just that you were dissatisfied in like several different areas, but like,
yes,
personal
I'll get
too.
into, yes. And I'm an open book. I will talk about anything. So yeah, I was living out in LA. I was engaged to a wonderful, wonderful person at the time. But the relationship just wasn't quite right for me. So I was working at Pepsi, wrong relationship, back pain. And I quit my job, left the relationship, and really was seeking a lot of answers. It was a confusing time. It was a hard time. I just redid everything.
When you left LA, you left the relationship and the job both pretty much basically at the same time.
Yep, I left the relationship, left LA a week later, and then 2 months later, I basically, well, maybe only a couple weeks later, I gave my notice, and I got to work a little longer while I was starting up this other business until they found a backfill for me.
Oh,
so
cool.
Within a period of about 2 months, I did everything. And I remember my mother specifically telling me, good old parents. So again, I left my home, left my relationship, and she said, Marisa, whatever you do, just don't quit your job right now. Just keep one thing stable. And I was like, okay. And then about a week later, I thought to myself, gotta quit. Because when you get to that point, again, it made my life a whole lot harder. It would have been nice to have that stable paycheck. There was a lot of things that I always look back at it now and think, okay, if I just started a new business and been in this relationship and a home, cool, like I could do that. But to do all three at once and in any combination was really hard. But at the same time, it was this isn't right, this isn't right. Why would I leave anything in my life that isn't? And I just there's a fun quote. I always butcher the quotes, but basically it talks about kind of if your life is not built by design, right, the way you talk about with the purpose, it's almost as if have these stacks of playing cards that are being like the house of cards, right? You pull one thing and it all just comes crumbling down. But when it all comes down, then it's super cheesy, but then you can build a solid foundation, right? You start with the cement, you build an actual house, and I feel like that's my life now. So I'm not going to pretend like it has been a walk in the park. It has been hard. It's just figuring it all out, but and I'll go through the businesses that have taken me to where I am today, but I feel like I have this really solid life built with a lot of self-development and purpose and intention, and I don't settle for anything that is not 100% right for me. So that's kind of where I am now, but I can I'll touch on each of those businesses if you'd like. It's been a weird journey and one I never could have predicted.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing that I started when I quit Pepsi was an online and e-commerce bakery. So my mother had run 4 dessert-only restaurants in Atlanta, and I restarted her business. But because of Tim Ferriss, I wanted to be remote. I didn't have a brick and mortar place like she did. I just sold desserts in boxes for kind of gifting occasions. So people would order for today's Valentine's Day. People would order for Valentine's Day. They'd order, a lot of my business was corporate gifts for around the holidays, Christmas, kind of in between Thanksgiving and that. And it was a great first start. It was the only thing I could think of at the time. Again, I knew brand marketing wasn't right, but I just didn't know what was. And I wanted to be an entrepreneur and kind of try something new. So that was, again, the best thing I could think of at the time. A couple months in, I learned I did not like baking. It wasn't the business. I felt like I couldn't be the face of it that I wanted to. I try not to eat. I do eat sugar for sure, but I try to be healthy, all the things.
Again, so kind of that contradiction of like with Pepsi, where it's like,
exactly,
what am I promoting here, kind of sort of thing. Conscience of crisis, or crisis of conscience, I guess is what they say, right?
I really felt that. And the one thing I did love is that people loved the brand story. I felt this connection to my mother for this business that she had run, and people would call me and email me many days the week, asking if it was the same business that she had run, and they remembered it and loved it. So it was special in ways, but exactly, it wasn't me. Didn't embody me. And so as I was trying to grow that business, as we talked about yesterday, the number one way to grow an online business is to grow your email list. And so I saw a Facebook ad that I clicked on that said how to grow your email list. And that's what led me to my next business, surprisingly. So you never know, starting one thing, who knows where it will lead you. So the next part was I clicked on this ad about building your email list, and it actually turned out to be about online courses. So it was how to build an online course, how to charge for them, what they are. And this blew my mind at the time because I didn't realize you could charge for information that you could package together through slides and recordings and sheets and things like that. How I didn't know this is beyond me, but all of a sudden I realized I didn't have to be baking and shipping products, and the margins were way higher. And I have a business degree, so I studied in college, and so my business mind is turning. And in that, I asked a lot of questions about, what are you interested in? What do you love to do? And my passion, the best next thing I could think of at the time was about colleges. I loved to visit colleges. I loved my own college experience, and I really loved helping people who were younger than me get to where they wanted to go. So I started an online course helping families with college admissions, was that next business. So anything before I keep going? I know it's not talking.
Sucking it all in. No, that's well, and it's what's interesting to me is how each business was truly different, but how each one evolved into the next one. Like you, I want you to keep going, because like what's really cool is how this next one flows into the next one, how it got you to where you are today with the medium. But again, like none of the things that or a lot of the aspects of what you've done with the newest aspect of your career, there's still takeaways all the way back from that bakery that you took away from that early stage on, that if you hadn't have had that experience, if you hadn't have, and we'll call it a failure even, but just for the sake of argument, but like if you hadn't learned from those early failures, like all those different takeaways, that was what allowed you to be able to figure out and have the success that you have now.
100%. And a lot of friends and family members thought I was crazy for closing the dessert place. That's what it was called. That first business, and the second business kind of still exists. But to walk away from so much hard work that I had put in, nobody could understand why. And I just had to say, no part of me needs to focus on this right now because I saw these future things that felt more authentic to me. And like you're saying, even though maybe it was a failure because it doesn't exist today, or, I'm not selling it and I closed it down, it wasn't because it didn't have the potential. It was because I found something more authentic. It evolved. And without, a lot of people say, well, do you regret doing it? Because I spent money and a lot of my time really putting my efforts into packaging design and building this website and all of these things. And I always say, absolutely not. I don't regret it one single second, because each of these things, as I look back, has taken me to where I am today. And if I never quit Pepsi and started that business and got to the next one and got to the next one, I would still just be working at Pepsi or something similar. And it's not that that's a bad thing. It's just not what I personally love to do. So I'm so grateful for all of my failures because they've led me to where I am today.
Yeah. And I hate to even call them failures, because that's really not the right definition. But like what appears from the outside maybe looks weird from the outside looking in. It was a very natural evolution for you. And it's kind of like with me, like when I first started this business and the podcast, everything that I'm doing, it's like, well, what is it that you're doing?
Right.
Well, I couldn't really put a definition on it because it was kind of evolving and changing, but I knew what it was, or I knew where it was going, but I to define it and constrain it. Like, I was just like, well, just trust me. It's going to be something great, but it's still kind of like it's taking form. And like right now it's the podcast, but it's morphed into video, into other things. And it's hopefully going to morph into some other things down the line for both.
Yeah. And it takes us some time sometimes to figure out exactly when you first start. It's almost, you feel like there's this big thing coming, but it just hasn't quite evolved yet. And sometimes it takes starting it and trying and starting and trying. And then suddenly you meet someone who tells you something and it takes you in another direction that we, again, maybe couldn't have seen or known when you started. But when I do coaching and a lot of the public speaking that I do, what I talk about is so many people just stay where they are because they don't know, let's call it that big grand mission, right? If I'm at point A and I want to get to Z, a lot of people won't leave A until they know Z. But I think a lot of times it takes B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and so on for you to get there. And I never would have gotten to the place where I am today if I hadn't had the courage to just say, this is just the next best thing that I feel like I can do. This is just the next best thing. And it evolves. But otherwise, I would say 90% of the people, it seems, just stay at point A and never try because they don't know where it's going, or it's scary. And it is scary for sure.
Yeah. Jim Rohn is another one of those guys that was a huge influence on me. And I was just listening to him this morning. He was talking about with goal setting and some of that kind of stuff. It's like, it's just do. It's not going to be right. It's not going to be perfect, but you just got to do.
Yeah.
And if you're waiting for the right circumstances, if you're waiting for the right perfect opportunity, then all those end up just being excuses. And if you'll just take the step forward, and it could be a little teeny tiny step forward, and that's the best way to do it. Those little small teeny tiny steps, but you just do it and come up short. Let it be terrible. It's like, I was thinking about it. The metaphor I was thinking about was riding a bike and doing a backflip on a bike. Like, you see somebody doing a backflip on a bike and it's really awesome and it's cool and it looks neat. And quite frankly, like, once you learn the mechanics of it, it's not even that hard to do, but you can't backflip a bike until you learn how to ride a bike.
Right.
You gotta learn to ride it first. And like, so it's okay to learn how to ride it first before you try to do a backflip. It's like, take your time, get your feet wet.
I love that analogy. And I wanted to go do the backflip, and I was disappointed when it wasn't in 3 months.
When you landed on your head and you're wondering why. Well,
what am I doing?
Take the time to learn first.
Yes, but it's so true. It's so true. And I love that analogy because we all just want to go do the backflip, but it can take time. And I sometimes say I do think that things can happen way quicker overnight when we're in that place of alignment and we've done the work and we know what's right. But a lot of times I think what takes the time is so much mindset work that I used to hear people talk about on podcasts, on the business people who would talk about all the self-development and their morning rituals and this and that. And that's what led to their businesses. And I just remember being like, okay, that's nice and all, but you have to bring in money and do the work. And this is how business and whatnot. But it's so very real. As I now look back at my time, the most resistance I face in all of these things is when I'm doing the wrong business, or I'm pushing down the wrong road, or I haven't learned a certain skill that I needed that I didn't even know that I needed. And that's to me, this newest business that I'm running, we'll get into the other two that take me here. It has felt like the easiest thing that I've done yet. And it is able to take off, and I'm doing the right things, but it's because I've had the last 5 years with 3 other businesses, going up against resistance and learning all those things and pushing it. And now I feel like I can snap my fingers, and I know all the skills, I know all the business things that I've done, and I will continue facing resistance and growing. And as things get onto a bigger scale and I learn new things, but it finally feels a whole lot easier than it did when I first started.
So let's make sure we do cover those. But as we go off topic, I want to make sure we do cover the 2 other businesses that you do, particularly the personal development one. Obviously, with us kind of being in that same vein, I'm very fascinated by that and how you kind of put that together. And then obviously, we want to talk about the fascinating experience it is the medium world that you're living in now. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. They're both so fun. So I still have the college core, the family that helps the business that helps families with college admissions. I can't even speak now. That still exists today. I am spending less time on it. It's pretty automated at this point. It's
it's kind of on cruise control at this point, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't bring in quite as much when I'm not putting in my effort on the top line to bring new people in. But it is neat that sometimes things trickle in ways, and I'm like, oh, that's a nice surprise. So that still exists. But as I was learning everything to get that business started, figuring out how to build out a webinar, an email list, a nurture sequence, how to sell, how to price, how to build landing pages, all of these things that I just didn't actually know anything about. And that was a big learning curve. I was studying from entrepreneurs, and as I was learning from them, they would talk about different books that they had read, or the self-development stuff, or morning routines, or meditation. And so I really started to get into that too. And I just saw this common trend, and I was kind of hesitant at first, but I just thought to myself, if everybody out there is doing this, I might as well give it a try. It can't be a coincidence. And I'm so glad that I did, because it's a lot of times when I started coaching business, and I'll talk about how I got there, but when I coach, a lot of the things I ask people is, what could you talk about for 24 hours and never get tired of? Like, what is that thing that excites you so much?
I like
that. And for me, a lot of that, it's between the 2 businesses that I'm doing now, is personal development stuff in the spiritual, energetic, law of attraction, manifestation, medium world. So I began reading, probably 50 books a year, 100% self-development books. I do not read fiction. I do not read fun, to each their own. I watch TV shows for that, but I just love that world. And so I was digging into this really to help myself. I had no intention of using it as a career or anything like that. But again, I was trying to figure out this relationship that I ended, and how to start businesses, and that was stressful, and this back pain and traveling and all of this. And so as I had this college business, I was reading all these books. I went and took my first kind of journey around the world, and I went to Southeast Asia. I started with 6 weeks in Bali, as every typical nomad, eat, pray, love person does.
Start with the beautiful place first.
I know,
the most beautiful place on earth. We'll start there.
Yes, I loved Bali. Super cliche, but yeah, I went to Bali and Thailand and 10 other countries and in Southeast Asia. And as I was traveling, I came across so many new friends who I was just able to help in these really magical ways, whether people were trying to figure out their relationships, or what they didn't like their job, but they didn't know what to do, or they didn't know if they should be home in an office or here or there, or just any kind of past traumas that people had dealt with. And I met strangers on buses, on planes, who, no joke, would tell me these really deep, dark things of, maybe one was cheating on their wife. One was doing this 3-month travel journey, and she was going to do a yoga meditation and then had to go back home to Sweden and didn't want to, all of these things. And again, really deep traumas that people had experienced that I won't mention here, but everybody would, the same thing everyone would tell me is, I don't know why I'm telling you all of this information. I just feel like I need to tell you this. And at the time I thought, I don't know why you are either, but I love to hear, I love to listen, I love to help. And so
you're a good listener, clearly.
I love it. I love it. You wouldn't think so here. I'm doing a lot of talking, but I am.
Well, as you're supposed to. I mean, a role reversal, but there is an art to listening. I mean, that's one of the things, like, as we do the podcast, I've learned is, like, there's an art to some of that. Like, you need to and some people have that gift, quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't. I tend to interrupt and be rude and get my 2 cents in, but clearly you've got that gift.
I do when I'm not on podcast episodes. I promise. And it's really about listening and asking the right questions and holding space for people. And so a lot of people during those first few months kept asking me if I was a coach, if I was a life coach. And so enough people started asking me this that, again, I listened to my clues. I learned to pivot quickly. This was not new to me.
Pay attention, right?
Yeah. And that's something I wouldn't have done before. I didn't know. And, you know, for people listening, it gets easier and easier and easier, but it was a scary thing to start a business and start something else, start a business. And it's like right when it starts to get big to pivot to the thing that's more important. So it can be exhausting, but I think it's really important to quickly get to that place to where you know what you want to do. And that can take these failures, if you want to call that, but starting and pivoting, I'll call them pivots.
Yeah, I like that.
So before I even got home, I was in the Philippines. I remember my best friend from college met me there and I was talking to her and I signed up for an online certification. I did it through Tony Robbins and I became a life coach while I had this college business. So I always kind of started side hustles from my own businesses. And that was the way I would keep pivoting. And so now I do a ton of one-on-one coaching and it's some of the most meaningful work I have ever done in my whole life. I start it from a place mostly of people who are confused with careers because it's an easy place to start. I've been through so many career transitions from the corporate world and starting businesses, and people who want to travel nomadically are a lot of the ones who are drawn to me as well. But then it gets a lot deeper because a lot of the times it's these old stories that we have that are holding us back from who knows what, or society feels like I should do this, or my parents do that, or I don't trust anyone and therefore I can't have a business partner, you know, making these things up. But there's a lot of really deep work that goes along, and it's honestly been the truest joy in a lot of my life so far. So I love the coaching that I do, and that was business number 3.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about like how the people were reaching out to you and felt very comfortable sharing with you, which apparently there were other people who felt the need to share with you as well. So let's go ahead and use that as a transition into the current business.
Well said. Yes. So as I was coaching, as I was traveling the world, as I said, I was reading a ton of self-development books. The other kind of parts I was reading about and really learning about and fascinated by was, I'll call it the spiritual world for lack of a better kind of umbrella term. But everything, law of attraction, manifestation, energy, channeling. And basically I found out, and I'll kind of tell the story, that I was a medium, again, which means I communicate with people who are not alive. This is not something I intended to do. This isn't something I didn't not believe it, but I was always kind of scared of the fence of, I believe this could be real. I don't know if it is. And growing up, my mother was always really interested in this sort of topic. She would talk about past lives that she'd experienced and spirits that she could feel in the room. And she started, when her father passed away, this is really, I think, where I started to believe. I went to a medium with her who would communicate with her father and a couple of other family members. And that was the first time I felt this is really real. This woman couldn't know any of this information, and it was mind blowing. So I would start going to channeling sessions with my mom, which is where someone basically channels spirits who kind of have this wiser knowledge. And it was just so fascinating. So my mom just loved it so much, and I just loved going with her. And then I started reading more about it, and I started listening to books and podcasts and videos that were channeled, and I became more obsessed with it than she even ever was. And so for me, how it started was I would do I still do a lot of journaling. For me, when I start to feel stressed or confused, or anytime my emotions start to feel out of check, I just journal, and it helps me figure out, oh, this is what this is actually about. So as I was doing that, I started through my writing, had writing come through the same way that channelers would speak, and it was words that were not my own. So again, this was a very surprising thing to me, but that's how it started. And then eventually words would start to come through from actual people who I had met or knew who were not alive anymore. So it started with a friend of mine who had a family member of hers commit suicide, and it was a year later. And so I called them my letters. This letter came through from her family member to her. And then one came through from my grandfather to my mother. And the thing, I think at that time, I felt like I wasn't sure if it was real. I felt these words were coming. They weren't my own. They weren't my own thoughts, but I didn't really know what it was. I wasn't sure of it. And then one of my mother's friends had heard about the letter I had written to my mom from my grandfather. And she had a daughter who was a freshman in college. And that daughter of hers, like he said, she said, that this daughter had a friend who had died of a drug overdose in high school. And my mom's friend asked if I could write a letter for this girl from this kid in high school who had died. And my response to that was, I will be happy to try. I have absolutely no idea if this is real, if this works. I don't know if anything will happen. But my thought was, as long as she knows that, it could be nonsense, it might not work, I'm happy to try. And so she sent me a photo of the person she wanted to connect with, and I just started writing. And this whole long letter came out. And the best way I can explain it when I write is that it feels almost kind of like a game of telephone. I don't really know what I'm writing or why. It feels like an inside joke, as in the words don't make sense to me because I don't know these people. I don't know what they're talking about, but they're words that come through. And so I sent it to her, and I will never forget. I said, here's what came through. Let me know if it means anything to you. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. And if it does, would love to know. And so I had never met this girl, and I didn't know her friend. And so she wrote back to me almost immediately and said, thank you so much. I don't know how you knew any of this information. This is exactly what I needed to hear. And I cannot thank you enough. Basically, this has changed my life. And from that moment on, I knew that I had a gift that had to be shared. And so I tried it with a lot of random people to start, to keep almost testing myself to see, okay, like, when is the other shoe going to drop? Someone's going to tell me this is all nonsense and it makes no sense. And to this day, nobody has still. So I've done dozens and dozens and dozens of these now. So random people from all over the world will have a website. They go and they submit a request with a photo and specific questions they want to ask. And I just tap into whatever this energy is, and I write. They're often several pages long, and the feedback I get is, I don't know how you knew this, and it's really healing. People just say, I've been crying and crying reading this, because they truly feel like they've connected to this person again. And the cool thing, and we can get into questions if you have, but it's not usually, a lot of people are really skeptical of, did you do some research, or, did you know these big facts? But it's really these weird little parts of the letter that people find most meaningful. So it might be a nickname that they were called, or I remember in one letter, there was something about this, looking for the sign of limes. And I remember I read them back. I don't know what I'm writing, but as it was reading back afterwards, I thought to myself, I don't know what this whole lime thing is. And it turned out they had a lime tree right in the back, like through her kitchen window. And it reminded her of her father. It was this really meaningful thing. So it's these weird little things that you could never research. I could never know, that are the cool little things that everybody resonates with.
No research would help you turn that leaf over, kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. So it's been a wild ride. And again, if you had asked me 5 years ago, if you had told me I'd be traveling the world writing letters from people who are not alive, I would have thought you were insane. I might be the insane person, but each of these journeys, and the fun part now is that I know how to expand this and run a business, right? So I know how to create the website. I've had a lot of friends that I've met traveling have helped me with search engine optimization and, writing an email nurture sequence and getting to know people. And it's fun how all of these worlds have combined, and how it kind of
how to codify it in a business environment, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Put it into a professional context.
Yeah.
Well, there's two aspects of that I find I'm kind of curious about.
Yeah.
The first part is, at the beginning, you said like you were first kind of getting some of this channeling, and it was kind of like, I don't know, that's like geared towards you, or how did it all, like the very early parts of this, where it wasn't necessarily like you were doing it for someone, but it was kind of like you were just discovering you kind of had that gift a little bit for yourself. Or tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's what I call that more of channeling, and that was really more personally for me. So the best way I can explain it is, it almost feels like, we call them spirit guides is the term that's generally used. But for me, as I was writing, if I think about parts of my life, I'll rewind then, it was kind of the thoughts of what should I be doing with my business? What should I do with my condo? Do I sell it? Do I keep it while I travel? I have a cat. What do I do? It was like all of these confusing things. And the channeling that comes through is really, it almost feels like it's almost feels like a fairy godmother, for lack of a better word, that kind of explains you're on the right path, or trust this gut, or try to put whatever these emotional things that were bothering me, it would kind of put it at ease. And it was really, you might want to call it your inner voice or your higher self, whatever it might be. I couldn't tell you exactly. I think it could be any of those things, but it was a lot of just self-guidance, for lack of a better term. And then I can do that for other people. It's not what I typically focus on. So my gift works the same. If you ask me to write a letter from your inner self, I could. But really what I focus primarily on are letters from people who have passed on. So it started for about the first 6 months. It was only channeling in that way, from inner self, spirit guides, whatever you want to call it. And then the first one kind of accidentally came through was that letter for my friend from that family member who had passed on. And so they feel very different. One is this calm sense of self. That's
right. I was gonna say it's a completely different kind of perspective. That's why I was curious.
Exactly, and that's just kind of how it keeps growing. And so to me, they feel like two very different skills, even though they both come through writing for me. But yeah, I think as I learn more, and as I get more open and more open and more open, and keep reading and learning what exists, I keep experiencing more things. And so I think the world is my limit, or outside of this world is my limit. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's neat that it comes through writing for me. I don't, there's people in the world who see ghosts or see spirits, and I don't walk around seeing dead people, which I think is great, because that might freak me out. But mostly I have to purposefully tap into it. Those first few ones kind of happened accidentally, and every now and then it does. But really, it's when I receive a letter or somebody asks me these questions for a specific person, I have to kind of get in that zone and then go into it. And yeah, that's kind of been the evolution so far.
That's a perfect segue into what that second question was some of the prep work that you do personally. Number one, are there lifestyle things that you try to do permanently that help you? I mean, I think a lot of this personal development is kind of what led you to discovering this gift. So I wonder, what are some of the regular habits that maybe help you? And then, like, when you do get a letter or request, are there some things that you do just for you personally to kind of, I don't want to say get in tune, but kind of like get in the right zone? Like, think about like writing in general, like you can get in the writing zone.
Yeah.
Just writing, like when I'm trying to write this book, where you can kind of, the pages just start to flow. Are there some things that you do to try to facilitate that?
Yeah, I'm lucky that it happens pretty quickly. I kind of have a couple of things I do that get me into that mindset. Basically, I just try to go to a quiet place where nobody else is around. So I'm usually working around a lot of friends and a lot of stimulation.
Right.
And so I have to remove myself from that. I sometimes will just literally go sit in bed or someplace and write. But to get in a quiet place, almost do a little bit of meditation or some, just take some deep breaths and really just kind of quiet myself. And then I just start writing. So it's really not, I'm not like lighting candles and sage and sitting on the floor cross-legged.
Drawing a pentagram on the floor.
Yeah,
and like, your crystals.
No seances. It's pretty simple, but it's really kind of like a meditative state for me. So in terms of that self-development and prep work in general, I do meditation twice a day. It helps me sleep. It helps me be less irritated with anything. It has a lot of benefits, but I think that, like you said, this whole self-development journey has been a part of that. And honestly, so that's the part of getting in tune with it. But in terms of learning it and how it came, I was reading about quantum physics and the science behind it all. And when I am around a lot of other people who are more tapped into it, I think it comes faster to me. So there's a lot of, I don't know if anyone knows, Abraham Hicks is kind of law of attraction, the start of law of attraction. I listen to a lot of Abraham Hicks. When I read channel works, when I read about past lives or chakras or this or that or the other, things tend to happen faster and more naturally for me than when I'm around people who have nothing to do with it and don't talk about it. So I guess just spending time with it. Yeah.
That's cool. Oh man, I just had a really, I just totally spaced it. I do want to kind of shift gears to, but there was something else I wanted to hit with that before I did. Oh man. Shoot, I think I lost it. Anyway, I did want to go back to talk a little bit more about the travel and the travel lifestyle and some of
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
absolutely.
So what's what obviously Bali was one of the big ones on the list or whatnot. What's one of your favorite places that you've been besides that?
Yeah, there's a
Or where you've
lot
had,
of
or is there a good story behind one like that you've had like as a neat something experience that happened to you in one of those places?
gosh, there's
I
stories
know you get a story for
everywhere.
everyone, right? Like there's like a list.
Yes, there's been some wild and crazy stories. I'll give it one of my favorite places is the first thing that comes to mind. Aside from, I think Bali is one of those places I loved living. Myanmar was one of my favorite countries I've ever been to. So borders Thailand, and a lot of people are afraid to travel there. There's a genocide going on in some northern parts of the country, but it is one of my just top favorite travel places because there aren't very many tourists there. I think it's what Thailand must have been 40 years ago. It just feels very real, very authentic, and it felt spiritually just like this really powerful place where the people were awesome. And it's hard to explain, but it was just one of my favorite countries, and every place I went there felt incredible.
Well, and again, it's just so beautiful, the jungle and it's so tropically and, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. I just remembered what I wanted to ask you about
Yeah.
was
Back up and then go for it.
yeah, sorry.
No
Wonderful
worries.
interviewing skills here. The meditation. Uh,
Yes.
I'm curious because you can do the apps, you can do like I personally really really like Michael Seeley on YouTube.
Uh-huh.
What do you use? Do you have a guided app or anything that you use? Is it something where you're just focusing on your own breathing, like where you do it all internally, being a road warrior like you are?
Yeah. So I heard a podcast of someone who taught meditation. This was about 3 years ago, probably at this point, and signed up for a course and took it. So
Any
her name
chance you
is,
remember what that was? As
yeah.
I'm
So her
trying
name
to
is Emily Fletcher, and her meditation is called Ziva Meditation.
say that again.
And
What's her?
Ziva, Ziva, Ziva Meditation. And
Oh, like Diva,
it
but
used to be
Ziva.
a 13-day course. It might be 15 or 17 days now, kind of an online thing that you can do. And the end result of that is 15 minutes twice a day of meditation. So first thing when I wake up or before I eat breakfast at some point, I do it. And then sometime between lunch and when I go to sleep to do a second one. And I was really religious about it, honestly, for a year and a half or so. And I still do it to the best that I can twice a day. And I will notice sometimes when it's hard, when I'm at home or you have a routine, it's very easy to stick to it. For
Right.
me, I'm in a new place and I forget and I'm going
Gotta
boxing,
be
meeting
tough.
friends in the morning. And but for me, I really do, when I start to feel a little more just irritated by life and I don't sleep as well. And that's when I notice I need to get more rigid about my meditation routine again, and I'll make sure I do it twice a day. So I definitely do it at least once a day, and I try to do it twice.
Nice, nice. Well,
Yeah.
that's another good segue into another question I had about routines.
Yes.
Being that you are traveling, and it
Yes.
does make it really tough to have
Yes.
daily routines in particular. Do you have any? I'm really curious, specifically morning and evening routines that you try to focus on.
I do, and you're very right. Depends. It changes a little bit where I am, who I'm with. So for me, when I wake up in an ideal world, I try to meditate first thing, and I like reading in the morning as well. I'm not typically a quote unquote morning person, so my brain doesn't. Honestly, I work best into the nighttime, but I
Yeah.
still feel like I'm
Well, and
supposed to be
morning can
working
be
in
a
the
relative
morning.
term. Morning can be 5 a.m. It can be
Oh,
10
so true.
a.m.
I am not up at
To
5. Yeah, I
noon.
read all the like the
Whatever.
Millionaire Morning Miracle, all the things, and I always
Right,
think
right.
I should get up at 5:30, but I won't. But I try to wake up sometime between 7:30 and 8:30, meditate, read, and if I can work out in the morning, I do. So I've been doing boxing early in the morning, or I'll go for a walk. And then, really, honestly, I start my workday around 11 or 12. By the time I've done all these things and eat
Right.
until. So really, for me, it's meditation, reading, and exercise are best for me in the morning. And then night, it totally changes based on where I am and who's around. But I do tend to get my best work done kind of into the night. So I'll work and then into dinner, hang out with some friends or people around. And then, I don't know, sleeping is easy for me. I just pass out when I'm ready.
Well, when you exhaust yourself throughout the day,
Yeah.
there's something to be said about getting to a level of exhaustion every day. I'm a very big believer in, sweating every day. So so
Yes.
you are tired when you comes to when it comes to the end of the day. So we've both kind of been down this personal development road, and there's all these different things that like we said, you can meditate, you need to be reading, you need to be doing all these different things.
Yeah.
So for Marisa, what was the one thing that had the most impact on getting you to where you are now out of that 9 to 5? Like, was it meditation? Was it the one thing for you in particular that had the most impact on getting you into that right state?
Yeah, so I guess there's two different parts. When I say out of the corporate job, that was before I started any self-development. I was not reading. The 4-Hour Work Week was one I read on vacation. 2 years before that, it was kind of an accident. That I think when I look back, people always told me around the time I left the relationship, left my job, left this, everyone say, you're so courageous, you're so brave. And I just remember at the time thinking, I didn't have a choice. I pushed myself so far that I just kind of broke through, and this was what was right for me. So the simple answer to that part is have courage. Just, trust that you're going to land somewhere. But in terms of the self-development to get where I am today, I would say really at the end of it, it's trusting your intuition. And there's a lot of, I do a lot of coaching through this. I'm happy to talk more about it if people have questions, but really learning, there's two kind of voices that you can hear. And one is the ego. It's this kind of fear chatter that's in your head of, don't do this, you might get robbed, you might, lose every belonging and never return. And the other one is your intuition. And it's this calmer voice that usually comes from your chest or your gut. And that's the voice that says, go travel, go to Bali, start this business, do this. And it never feels scary. And so for me, I would say learning to trust that intuition, a lot of that came through writing for me to start. And now I can just shut my eyes and I even think, what do I want for lunch? And I'm going to trust my intuition. Like it gets that down to as little as that versus really big decisions. But I practice it all along the way with these small things. So trusting your intuition, learning to listen to it. I think we just have all gotten in this place, especially in the US, where it's just this fear chatter in our brains and everything we take in from the news and this and that. But as I look back, it's really just listen to that voice, listen to what's deeper inside, because that's what's going to take you to your calling and not the scared voice that is very real and exists in your head.
Okay, cool. So you've also, one of the things that as I've done this personal development stuff, I've tried to consider some of these certifications. Like you've done a meditation certification, you got to go to the Tony Robbins course, which is awesome from what I hear. And there's like the email list starter and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
We talked about the personal development stuff that was of the most benefit to you. Of all those training certifications that you got, which one of those do you feel like paid the most dividends for where you're at right now? Because there's a million of them, right? Like I look at all these and quite frankly, a lot of them are garbage. Like I signed up for one and 3 weeks in, I asked for my money back and I was like, I didn't want to, it just wasn't a good course. But then I've also done like Jim Rowan's thing and it's all online and it's pretty inexpensive and there's a lot of good benefit there. So I felt like there was some value. Which one of those provided the most value for you?
Gosh, they provided value in different ways, but as I think to the one that really impacted my life the most, more, a lot of the self-development stuff I've taken through reading books and things like that. But the online course that really got me started with the online course world and teaching me about this and really thinking through what kind of business do I run and here's how to automate it and here's how to build out a course and that sort of thing was a man named Mike Dillard. And I don't even know if this course exists anymore, but he has a podcast called Self-Made Man. But his course was all about how to build a course, how to market it, how to price it, how to do monthly memberships and things like that. And I would just say that there's a lot of people who teach it now. I think Amy Porterfield does it really well. I've taken some of her courses. But Mike Dillard, I randomly that was the one who I clicked through for that email list ad. And it really just changed my life personally. I used to binge listen to, I didn't know other podcasts really exist. And I just wanted to hear more from him. And I would binge, he had probably a year or two worth of episodes. I just listened to all day, every day as I was locking myself alone in Atlanta, not seeing friends and family, building these businesses. And it really just changed the course of my life. So if I heard that today, now I know a lot of this information. I don't know if it would be as magically life-changing, but at that time, it really had the most impact on me.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that Tim Ferriss book. It was like the right place, the
Exactly.
right thing at the right time. And I
Right,
found that
right.
so true with all these big success stories of people that I hear. It's almost to a man. There was like this one point, like I was at this low point and I found a Zig Ziglar tape, or I was at this low point and I
Exactly.
listened to Jim Rohn or Tony
Yeah,
Robbins. Like they're always like at a critical
at
point
that
and they
point.
got that critical information that just
Yes.
flipped the
Yep.
switch, man. And then it was
Yeah.
like game on.
Yeah. And that's why I always tell people to listen to any clues that you follow. So at that beginning time, when I was listening to a podcast and someone said, I read this book or I read that book, and some of them I would think to myself, okay, it doesn't call to me. And some of them would. And so I had these notes in my phone. So for anyone listening, if meditation is what you feel like you need right now, and maybe Ziva meditation is for you, or Mike Dillard or whatever it is, just listen to your gut. Again, listen to that intuition of what calls you, what excites you, what do you feel drawn to, even if you don't know why. Because, for me, as we look back at my steps of online bakery business, college admissions course, one-on-one coaching to writing letters as a medium, they're seemingly very unconnected, but as Steve Jobs said, you can't connect your dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. And so anything that you just feel drawn to, excited by, if you don't know why, read it, listen to it, ask somebody about it, look on Google, whatever it is. And that's really where your life can unfold in this way. But if you don't ever listen to those clues or just try out those things, you just stay the same.
Well, and for me too, I found like the biggest thing that you do to get started down this path is you have to figure out what it is that you want. And what is
Yes.
the things that you're after. And as soon as you figure out where you want to go, then you start asking for the things you need to get there.
Yes.
And what was so fascinating for me personally, it was like, as I started asking for the things I needed to be able to be
Yeah.
successful, I realized how many of those answers were all around me. And
Yes.
many of those answers had been there all the time.
Right,
I just
right.
never bothered to ask. I just never
Yes.
bothered to take the blinders off and realize here's a resource sitting right in front of you that's going to provide you with the pathway to get to where it is you think
Yeah.
you want to go. But until you know where you want to go, you don't
Yeah.
know who the people are that can help you to get there. So
Yeah.
that's
There's
such a
two kind
big
of
part of it.
analogies I have for that as you're talking. It reminds me. One is when people say, when you go to go buy a new car or something like that, and you decide whatever make or model, and then you start to see it absolutely everywhere, right? Whereas you've never ever seen it
Right.
before.
Yeah.
So it's that same kind of principle here where, for me, let's think about law of attraction. That's a lot of, what I love to learn and teach. And I had never even heard it
So
before.
true.
And then all of a sudden, once you're aware of it, it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And then the other analogy about having that direction, I talk about it as, if you have a place in your GPS, say, I want to go here, it's a 5-hour drive. I know where I'm going. I can take different routes. I can see, but like, this is the path I'm going on. And as you said, these things present themselves to get you on this direction there. Whereas if you have no idea where you want to go, you don't set a goal, anywhere can happen. And so you just kind of end up meandering in no direction, in no different way. And so again, even if you don't know what your big grand mission is, what is that one next thing you want? Is it a new job? Is it to travel? Is it to work remotely? Is it, whatever it is, set whatever that next best thing you can think of. And that's a lot of the work I do one-on-one coaching, is to help people figure out, what is it you want? What are your values? What do you prioritize over the other? Because a lot of times it pulls at us in both directions of, I want to save the world and work at a nonprofit, but I also want to make enough money to live. And there's ways to have both, to help the world and run a business or work for, travel, whatever it is. But we have to really prioritize what you care most about, set that intention, and figure out how to get there.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about it, is like, no matter what you want to do, there is a pathway to go do that.
Yes.
It's just a matter of deciding what that is and then figuring out what the pathway is. Well,
Yeah.
so true. Well, I really, I feel like we're just scratching the surface, but as I look down, we've burned through almost an hour and a half like that. And I'm nervous to like go down another rabbit hole. Oh man.
Deep breath. So many topics.
So let's take a second. Let's plug your social media. Anything that you're involved in that you want to talk about. I always especially want to give people an opportunity to plug charities, anything that they support, that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So for charities, Pencils of Promise is my go-to. I donate a percentage of all of my revenue to Pencils of Promise, and I have the goal of building a school in Ghana. So Pencils of Promise is a education nonprofit, if you will, that builds schools in Ghana, Laos, and Guatemala for rural areas of people, children who wouldn't otherwise have access to education. And what I love is that they don't just build it and leave. They also use these continual funds and donations to keep funding teachers to be there and school supplies and all of that. So Pencils of Promise is my go-to.
And what's their website? They have a website or anything? Is it
if you just Google
pencilsofpromise.com?
Pencils of Promise, they're really big, and that will come up. So that's the charity. In terms of where to find me, there's a couple things. For anybody who might be interested in that medium world, if that's your thing, if it's calling, and you want to see an example of what one of those letters looks like, you can go to Marisa, is my first name, Marisa, medium.com/extraordinary. And you can download a sample letter, and it has some, the one that I provide has comments from the person who actually received the letter saying, this was meaningful because this little detail meant this to me. So if you're just curious about what that looks like, you can go view the letter there. Otherwise, my general website, if you want to request a letter, read more information, is marisamedium.com. And then if you just want to follow my travels, I really just post my day-to-day life at boxing in the beach or Mexico or Oman or wherever I am. And that's at MLMEDDIN, so ML Meddin.
Yeah, if you want to spend your day feeling jealous and envious of an amazing lifestyle, or better yet, to be inspired to live a more compelling lifestyle, Marisa, I'm really grateful that you took the time to come on our show. And I love what you're doing. I love that you took that leap and you're living that dream, and that you're really like you're showing people like, you can do it, man. Like here is a way here. It's like, it's so neat to see people not just talk the talk, but walk the walk and live the lifestyle. And there's so few people that are crafting a lifestyle by design, figuring out what they want and how they, to have somebody like you as a go-to. Hey, you want to have that Instagram that looks like your there's a way to go do it, and you can just follow Marisa's path. And that was one of the things that definitely attracted me to you, was that your Instagram page is definitely amazing. And did you even, well, I guess your podcast is on your website as well. So, we want to make sure we plug don't you have a podcast as well?
No, not personally. No. Yeah. I just am talking to you guys and sharing my story. Yeah. Just talking to you. But Instagram, I really do try to show real life in the countries of, what it's like with locals, and not just the glamour shots. I'm not dressed up in like beautiful dresses and makeup. It's just my life here. But to your point, I followed a lot of people online, of travelers, to know that it was something possible before I did it. And so it's really an honor to share it and show that it's possible as well. And a lot of the coaching I do is to help people to get there. So if that's of interest to anybody as well, just reach out, message me. I'm a real person and I will respond. And I love to get in touch with everybody.
Great. So last question, 10 years from now, what does an ideal everyday day look like for Marisa?
Yeah, I would love to think I'm traveling in a way still.
And I want to know where too. Where do you think you'll be 10 years to the day? Where do you think you're going to be?
Yeah, honestly, I know. I honestly imagine myself having a home base in Atlanta and then popping into different places for maybe a month or a couple weeks at a time still. So my goal is to get to every country in the world. I would say it doesn't have to be in the next 5 days. It doesn't have to be immediately, but I really want to keep exploring these untouched places. And so maybe I'm in a foreign country or at home, but my ideal mission, I do believe, will still be the same, is to heal people, to keep healing. And so I hope that I'm leading larger retreats in foreign countries, helping people heal and learn the self-development while they're in other cultures and learning and traveling. And that's really kind of my ideal, is to keep helping people heal from pain and suffering and illnesses in whatever way is calling my name at that time. So whether it's medium, coaching, retreats, speaking, writing, all of the things, that's what I imagine still doing in 10 years, and whatever else I learn along the way will be added to that. Yeah, still living the dream and helping other people do the same, really, truly.
That's the best part about it, is helping others to find that dream. That's what makes it so fulfilling at the end of the day. Well, and I hope that either in the immediate future or the long-term future, when you do get back to Atlanta, since you're not a
Yes.
local anymore, you let us know. We'll come down. We'll take you to the good spots to eat and reintroduce you
Yes.
to the city. Because I tell you what, you stay gone from this place very long. It's amazing how
I
much
know, it
it's changing
changes
and
so fast
growing,
now.
and
Yeah.
it's you probably wouldn't hardly even recognize it. It's
I know, it's so
something else.
crazy.
But thank you for your time, and
Thank
thank
you,
you for
Nate.
your example, and keep
You're
living
so
it.
very
And
welcome.
looking
Thank
forward
you.
to
You
we'll
too,
do this
and keep
again soon.
inspiring.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right, bye.